Hi there, this is Thomas of ParaLabs, and today we would like to introduce our MindSet testing experiments. We are using these tests for about 15 years now, so they are definitively road tested, as you will see. Believe us, they are fun and easy to use and advantages on several levels. Okay, what it is all about. As you may know, people are generally more interested in people than in things. And of all the people they could be interested in, they are most interested in themselves. So, if you tell people something about themselves, their personality, their character, and what distinguishes them from others, you will immediately have their interest. But what if you could not only run a series of experiments as major effects involving all the participants, but also entertain them in doing so? What if you could also position yourself as a knowledgeable and competent expert in human behavior at the same time? And what if you could run this series of entertaining experiments honestly and genuinely, based on valid scientific research, mimicking neuropsychological experimental approaches? And even more than that, what if these experiments could allow you to identify several potentially cooperative and open-minded participants for follow-up mentalism effects? Or vice versa, what if our experiments could help you to identify people you wouldn't want as participants? People who would more likely be biased and overcritical and probably less cooperative in the subsequent routines. Wouldn't all that be great? So here you get a series of tests we used that you can carry around in your pocket, ready to present at the moment's notice. They are entertaining, but should be taken seriously. They can involve as many participants as you wish, and they involve neo-trickery. That means that they never fail. They can be used in any performance venue: stage, parlor, close-up, table hopping, you name it. The tests do not require any trickery, as I said. You do what you say and every result is a good one because it is true, real, and therefore credible. So you can fully concentrate on the presentation because there is nothing to hide. And the success rate of the experiments in terms of a usable result is 100% without exceptions. So, with all that said, let's start with a brief description of the scientific background. As already mentioned, our tests are based on genuine scientific research. If you are interested in studying the original publications, you can find them here in Professor Peter Brugger's Right Hemispatial Inattention and Magical Ideation, and especially in Dr. Christina Moore's work on the neuropsychology of magical belief. For her PhD thesis, she ran a series of experiments that we used as templates, if you want to phrase it that way, for our MindSet testing kit. But even if all this has a genuine scientific background, you don't have to be afraid. We streamlined all this to a degree that there is absolutely no need to be a scientist on your own to follow the ideas. Being an interested mentalist or magician is definitively enough. Okay, in a nutshell, what are the neuropsychological and neurophysiological basics of our tests? Let's start with some neuropsychology for lay people. Actually, there are two factors contributing to the working of the phenomenon we take advantage of. Most people know that their brains are separated in two hemispheres, the left and the right one. Now, it is well known that each half of the brain, each hemisphere, almost exclusively controls the motor functions of the opposite side of the body. This means that our senses of sight, sense and touch are essentially cross-wired. So essentially, the left hemisphere controls your right hand movements and is more involved in the right part of the fields of vision, and this is reversed for your right hemisphere. That is more involved in movements and sensory perceptions of the left side of the body. Okay, This is the first of the two contributing factors. The second one is something that many people have heard of, but usually overestimate. However, there is a tendency for the left hemisphere to control rational and logical matters. As I said, most people have heard about this. And on the other hand, there is a tendency for the right hemisphere to control creative impulses. Now, older publications used to see that brain hemispheres' functions were distinctively separated. So left equals logic versus right equals creativity. But this idea is not so dogmatically held these days. Even if a distinct separation like this is still proclaimed oftentimes these days, but this is an oversimplification. It is simply not true if you see it dogmatically. There is still, however, a wealth of studies which supports the case that certain aspects of creativity at least are associated with the right hemisphere. The evidence is well documented in MRI scans, for example, which showed that the amount of activity involved in the right hemisphere is above average for people who can easily imagine things and envision possibilities. And exactly this is useful to us, as it is just such open-minded and creative people who are potentially good participants for our mentalism routines. Simply put, potential believers are more creative in thought, are more imaginative, and show more activity in their right hemisphere. Critical disbelievers tend to favor the left hemisphere. So, let's put these two factors together. The aspect of the right hemisphere causing a tendency to the left in motoric and sensoric, and the aspect that this right hemisphere has a tendency to be more involved, to become more active when it comes to certain aspects of creativity. We can now combine these ideas of motor and sensory skills control together with the tendency to the left to help us to identify the more right-brained believers, whose imagination and creativity are going to facilitate our mentalism effect, as you will see. We should point out, however, that the results of the scientific experiments demonstrating these principles dealt with statistical probabilities of population rather than for a specific individual. There is therefore no guarantee that the test results for a given person will match the whole population. Nevertheless, in our experience, the overall results are surprisingly clear, even if they are not obtained under constrict laboratory conditions. As already mentioned, entertaining simulations have allowed us to gain useful insights into our participants' minds for 15 years now, when introducing our performances. Okay, let's take a closer look at our actual experiment. As our starting point, we can presume that a mentalism routine, and specifically a reading, will go much more smoothly if we have an open-minded participant. It would therefore be advantageous if we could identify those wonderful right-brainers and separate them from the less helpful left-brainers in advance. We can use Dr. Moore's work to do just that. As we said, these tests don't comply with strict scientific protocols, but they do give a hint. They set a premise and offer fun topics of conversation when we use that tests. We have developed these specially designed ParaLabs testing cards, which can easily be carried around in your wallet for quick and authentic tests. Let's take a look at our first experiment. Maybe you want to join in and take part in the experiment as well once I explain them. In this case, you could have a piece of paper and a pen handy. It works without anyway, but for now, for explanation purposes, it would be better if you could writing material ready. Okay, so here we go. Okay, in the first test I'm going to call out several pairs of numbers. Your task is to note spontaneously the middle number of each pair, in the sense of what you think is the mean. You should do this instantly and without adding the numbers of each pair up and dividing by 2, okay? Ready to go? You will have just a second or two to estimate the mean. Here we go. 2, 8. 15, 3. 17, 7. 3, 11. 5, 17. 14, 2. Okay, if you participated, you will have 6 numbers in front of you, each estimated to be the mean of a pair of numbers. Before we are going to evaluate your results, I'd like to introduce the test as such. One card is printed with several pairs of numbers, as shown. All the participants are given a pen and paper, and after a short introduction we call out the outer numbers of each row, which is 2, 8, 15, 3, 17, 7, and so on. The participants are asked to note spontaneously the middle number. This is what they think is the mean of each pair. And as I said, it is of importance that they do this instantly and without adding them up and dividing by 2. Now, on the cards, the actual mean is printed on the number line between the 2 outer numbers. This is between 2 and 8, the number 5, between 15 and 3, the number 9, and so on. Now, the point is that if any of the participants or if you show a repeated bias towards smaller numbers than the actual mean, we can assume a higher activity in the right creative hemisphere. And to get this result, it does not matter whether you say the larger or the smaller number first. Why does this work? Well, let's take a look at this example. Let's say I'm calling the numbers 5 and 17. Now, in most people's imagination, they unconsciously create a number line in their minds and take a look at it to estimate the middle. A number line with the smaller numbers on the left and the larger number on the right. The reason for this order is that we write from the left to the right in our culture. It would be different in Israel or in Arabic countries. However, from the left to the right is an internalized direction in most other countries in the world. If I would give you number cards, for example, and they demand to place them in an increasing order horizontally on the table in front of you, you would automatically place the lower numbers on the left and the higher numbers on the right, right? So, when estimating the mean, you created subconsciously an imaginary number beam in your mind. Now, in our example, the actual mean is 11. Now, if your left hemisphere is more dominant in your particular case, it would lead your attention more to the right-hand end of your imaginary number beam. You would overestimate the mean and pick a higher number in tendency. Not reliable for one estimation, but if you would go for a number of tests, a series, you would go for higher numbers anyway, more often than for numbers which are a lower number than the actual mean, and vice versa. If you have a predominating right hemisphere, you would therefore tend to get a mean value toward the left-hand end of that imaginary line, which is a number lesser than the mean in tendency. You may want to check your results now to see which of the cases is true for you. You may have found the exact mean a few times, and maybe you sometimes picked a number too high and in other cases too low. But overall, what is your tendency? In the case that is completely balanced in your case, congratulations! Each result we get as performers is a good result. It tells us something about our participants anyway. And each result is interesting for them as well. Does this work in practice? Well, as mentioned above, the tendency is statistically significant for population as a whole. So it may not accurately describe a result for a specific individual. What it does do, however, is to provide one indication amongst several others, when choosing suitable subjects for a mentalism routine. Okay, this was a test with numbers. In experience, many people might tell you that they're not good in numbers and math anyway. Even if this is not of interest here, as you may have already realized, our second test is for those who claim to be more in words than numbers. Let's go for this. So the second test we can apply is aimed at the participant's ability to form creative word associations. Maybe you want to join in again and attend, as your audience would do. Either you take your pen and a piece of paper again, or you simply use your fingers to count at least the number of word associations you can find. It's all about this. I will call out pairs of words. And your task is to find a third word or a third term which can be associated with the two words called out before. For example, if we were to take the words book and tree, you may make a word association paper. Clear? Okay. You will have to find your associations spontaneously. I will give you about 5 seconds or so for each. So either you write down the connecting word or term you find, or you count your associations at least with your fingers, if you find one. If you don't find one for a given pair of words, well, obviously you don't count and you can't write something down. It will be 16 pairs of words for which you have to find associations. Ready? Okay, here we go. Warm sofa. Lightning noise. Homeland reader. Hunger heat. Jug escape. Fish fire. Thorn bride. Anvil nail. Can photo. Dog mouse. Effect brother. Onion grieve. Puree pelt. Bean tea. Stable flag. Youth pension. So this was it. Maybe there is an issue with my bad pronunciation here. However, you will see the idea behind this test in a minute anyway. Now, actually all this is not about the associations as such, in the sense of which word or term you found. It is rather about the question whether or not you find connecting terms or not, respectively how many associations you found. Most people will agree that this was pretty easy for, well, in fact, half of the word pairs, while it was pretty difficult or even barely possible for the other half. And this is intentionally, exactly this is the point here. The novelty behind this particular test of ours is that there are only simple and straightforward word associations between every second pair of words. That is between the even numbered pairs, 2, 4, 6, 8 and so on. If you look at the cards, you will see the word associations that might be expected are thunder for lightning and noise, right? And for hunger and heat, most people come up with thirst easily. There might be water for fish and fire. Anvil and nail can be connected by the word hammer. Dog and mouse are linked by cat. Tears can be the associated term for onion and grief. Coffee for bean and tea. And youth and pension might be connected by the word age, or terms synonymous with these. So all this was pretty easy when looking at the even numbered pairs. However, in order to find a logical and feasible association with the odd-numbered pairings, 1, 3, 5, 7 and so on, the participant would need an above-average portion of flexible thought and creativity, and more pronounced imaginative ability. Take a closer look at these. You might find associations, but you will agree that those are not as obvious, straightforward and common than for the connecting terms for the even-numbered pairs. Right? Okay, if you agree that it is hard to find proper associations for the odd-numbered word pairs, you will agree as well that someone who finds several of these anyway will be a pretty creative person with a strong imagination. And that probably would therefore suggest that they are more predisposed to mentalism routines requiring imagination and creativity. So here you have it. Now, we had an experiment based on numbers and one based on words. Let's proceed a test that is targeted to rather visual imagination and the connection between visual impressions and emotionality or even empathy. The third variation of our test comes in form of cards depicting the curious-looking Janus faces, in variation A and B. We display those cards to our participants as I do it right now here with my faded-in pictures. The task is quite easy. Which one of these two faces do you think is more happy-looking? We don't accept an abstention. You have to decide intuitively. Remember, there is no right or wrong. It's all about your personal feelings and preferences. So go for it now. Which one looks more happy to you? Okay, done? Now, most people find the comparison of the two to be ambiguous, obviously, and with a good reason. Apart from the fact that card B is the mirror image of card A, each half of the faces seems to have both a happy and a sad expression. And because of this, if you find one face more happy or more sad looking than the other, then your preference tells me something about you. When you find the face more happy or more sad looking than the other, then I know that your perception does not depend on the picture itself. Your perception can't depend on the picture itself, as both of them are identically ambiguous. So your judgment is more likely to be based on your subjective perspective, and specifically, it reflects which side of the face you spontaneously and intuitively pay more attention to in each picture. Remember that people with the dominant right hemisphere have a motoric and sensoric tendency to the left, while those people with a more active left hemisphere have a motoric and sensoric tendency to the right. So, if you pay more attention to the left, your more active right hemisphere might be the reason for this. Now, the majority of the right-brained people tend to find face A is happier, based on their stronger reliance on information presented to the left side of their field of vision. And vice versa, the left-brainers tend to find face B happier. This is because their stronger reliance on information presented to the right side of their field of vision. After all, participants were biased towards open-minded, creative thinking, therefore have a stronger appreciation of the left-sided picture, which is A. Conversely, more skeptical and rational thinkers find face B more happy-looking than face A. Again, while these test results are really only applicable to larger sample sizes in our experience, experiments such as these are fun as well as interesting for the participants. They say something directly about the participants themselves. I mean, what about you? Have you not thought about the pictures and how you would interpret them? As I said at the start, what is almost universally applicable is our interest in other people, but mainly in ourselves. Additionally, these experiments reinforce our authenticity and help to position us as competent authorities and performers. They help to open even a pathway for skeptics to suspend their disbelief and serve as a comfortable warm-up for other mentalism effects. These benefits should not be underestimated. Okay, there's one additional demonstration which can be performed completely impromptu, in close-up and almost any location. Again, it will prove interesting and entertaining for participants and useful for picking usable participants for further effects. Let's say you're sitting at a table with a few people and you propose the following test. You instruct them to get at least 3 markers of a kind, each to fix various positions on the table in front of them. The markers could be anything, readily available to mark out a short distance. They might use glasses, cutlery, salt and pepper pots, or serviettes, for example. Ask them to place 2 of the markers about 100 centimeters apart on the table in front of them. The exact distance doesn't matter. The participants are now asked to close their eyes and concentrate. And then, without looking, they should place their dominant hand, usually their right hand, where they think the middle point is between the markers. It is important to note that the participants must not count, feel or otherwise measure where the actual middle point is. They simply need to use their spontaneous judgment to indicate where they think the middle is and to point at this spot. Using the phrase "the middle" already helps to emphasize that the exact length of the distance does not require geometric precision. What you are likely to find is that the overwhelming majority of healthy right-handed people tend to drift to the left of the actual middle. But this tendency to drift to the left is more pronounced in open-minded and creative right-brainers, compared with the more skeptical and rational left-brainers. While the leftwards tendency does not prove that the participant must definitively be a believer in paranormal phenomena, it does suggest a degree of creative mental flexibility, which can be of use to us. Okay, let's come to a conclusion. First of all, we like to emphasize on the fact that the results of such tests cannot be interpreted to mean that a particular participant to whom we attribute a tendency to dominate the right hemisphere would definitively be a creative believer to whom any nonsense could be told. Please don't see it this way, even if the motor and sensory tendency were very clearly to the left. In such case, however, we can, as a working hypothesis, assume a quite pronounced creative mental flexibility. And already this is an advantage in many mental routines. A person who is open to ideas and has a strong imagination tends to be a good candidate for us. It even doesn't matter whether we use the middle number exercise, the word association test, the Janos faces choice, or this last middle guessing experiment to discover creatively inclined participants. And whether you use 1, 2, 3 or all of these tests of the series doesn't matter as well. And when you're using more than one, even your composition of particular tests and their order are completely irrelevant. None of these exercises rely on any form of trickery to produce their results. Agreed, these tests may not seem to be that exciting compared to the effects of classical mentalism work. A design duplication, a metal band, or a confabulation routine. However, there are many advantages to deploy these tests anyway. Specifically, participants find the tests intrinsically interesting. They are also presenting a set of science-based tests which allow us to concentrate on our participants and build rapport while confirming our authenticity as a mental performer. We can therefore be totally relaxed during the presentation, as we have no trickery to accomplish, and we can use the results of the tests to pick out suitable candidates for the rest of the mentalism performances. And given the credibility of the tests, we can use the fun, entertaining and revelatory nature of the results to position ourselves as experts in human cognition and behavior. These tests then form an important and useful component of all performances. Again, if you are interested in the real scientific background of our test variants, we recommend the original sources mentioned at the beginning. If you feel like to do your research on your own, you find with little efforts various other studies that have dealt with these or similar questions. Our selected and choreographed tests entertain, have real scientific backgrounds, and offer an added value that should not be underestimated. Obviously, you can reproduce our tests straight away after seeing this explanation. However, if you might feel like valuing our efforts, research and development by getting yourself our set of testing cards, and you can get them at the QR code displayed here. By the way, we produce both the corresponding manuscripts, the explanations, and the cards in English, German, Spanish and French, so go for it! Try it out and have fun. As always, we are grateful for feedback and experience reports. So, here we go. Cheers, bye-bye.